two different positions. We have our own Dan Courtney. Dan has an engineering degree from Clarkson University. He's our VP of FUNY and co-founder of Upstate Atheists. He has two sons and lives in Rochester with his fiancée. I'm going to Marcelina. Is it Marcy? It's Marcy. We always call her Marcy. No, there you go. And representing another position, our theistic position today, is Jeremy Stidd. Jeremy was born and raised in Rochester. After completing high school, he went to receive a degree in theology from Boston Baptist College. He's traveled to many places in the eastern U.S., either preaching or lecturing on the Christian faith. He primarily defends Christianity in hostile environments, especially in the realms of philosophy and morality. He currently resides in Rochester, where he works for a small contracting firm, as well as teaches in his local church. He's a member of the local Christian apologetic group called Veritas Exchange. Please help me welcome Dan and Jeremy, and let's hear what they have to say today. And we'll hold our questions. I think, Buzz, we have a format in mind.
Yeah, I'll do a set briefly.
All right, very good. Help me welcome Jeremy.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jeremy, for coming today. Thank you, Andy, for being our timekeeper. I appreciate that.
Let me know when we're going to begin.
Okay.
Go ahead. Here you go.
And thanks, everybody, for spending your afternoon here with us today. Just a quick note on the format. Jeremy and I are each going to do 15-minute presentations, and then we'll each have a 5-minute rebuttal, and then a 5-minute closing statement. Let me just say that although Jeremy and I have very different opinions on many subjects, including the subject of today's debate, the source of morality, we do have one thing in common. We both strive for the betterment of mankind. Our visions on how to achieve that objective are quite different, but I respect his intent, and I hope that we can all benefit from the discussion today. When I suggested the topic of today's debate, the source of morality, I did so because theists and atheists often approach the subject in completely different ways. And importantly, the approach we use informs how we act. It is our actions towards each other that will determine whether or not we succeed in advancing the human experience. Let me restate this critical point. The one thing that we control in what Sam Harris calls the moral landscape is how we act towards each other. It is the impact of those actions on the others that determines the action's relative morality. But before describing the sources of morality, let me define the word itself. A practical definition is how thinking beings interact and the consequences of those actions. Moral philosophers agree that interactions between sentient beings that have the ability to experience pleasure and pain is required for morality to have any real meaning. As Aristotle wrote, moral excellence comes about as a result of habit. We become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, and brave by doing brave acts. Aristotle recognized that it's not what one believes that makes them moral, but how they act. I would go further and say that specific actions are not inherently moral or immoral, but it is the consequence of those actions that determine their morality. Going back to our definition, how thinking beings interact and the consequences of those actions, the consequences are integral to our understanding of morality. So with the actions and their consequences as the arbiters of morality, let's look at the sources of morality. Morality actually has several sources. First, it is a product of our evolution. Our moral intuitions are literally encoded into our genes. Second, morality is transmitted by culture. Although not so much a source of morality as a means of passing it from one generation to the next. And third, reason. Morality is derived or modified through the application of reason. This may be where the views of the atheist and the theist come into the greatest conflict. Although we may not agree that our morality is shaped by reason, you will see that we can all be thankful that most religions ultimately concede in practice to reason, although begrudgingly. These natural sources of morality are, I will show, sufficient, in that these elements lead to moral systems, and necessary, meaning that without them, moral systems are not possible. Students of logic will recognize that these are the conditions necessary to establish a cause and not merely a correlation. In other words, establishing that these sources of morality are both sufficient and necessary, we can conclude that they are the source of morality and not simply the consequence of some supernatural command. Not only is appeal to God not necessary, but it will become clear that any such appeal actually undermines sound moral reasoning. So, how is evolution a source of morality? Well, from altruistic behavior to accomplishing tasks beyond individual capability, humans have evolved in socially cooperative groups as a means for survival. It is beyond question that cooperation greatly enhances individual survival, and the rules that help govern our interactions have evolved with us. Now, perhaps some among you, along with my counterpart here today, may not accept that all living things descended from a common ancestor. But that issue is for a different debate. For today, we'll stick with the established fact of evolution. But even if you accept, just as a minimum, descent with modification within a species, also often called microevolution, it will be sufficient to explain the evolutionary roots of morality. Virtually all creationists accept that microevolution exists, so you could still be a creationist and agree with my position. Some of the most powerful evidence for the evolutionary source of morality comes from our non-human relatives. Only recently have scientists begun to look more seriously at the intricate moral systems employed by other species. Social animals of all kinds have evolved systems that are in many ways very similar to our own. While some interactions may be difficult to explain, and some push the bounds of being mutually beneficial, all the varied and intricate social systems utilized by non-human animals expose the myth that humans are uniquely moral. The more we look, the more we realize that we are not alone, and the same natural forces are at work all around us. Contrary to the opinions of some early biologists and philosophers, non-human animal existence, especially for social animals, is not just some type of free-for-all, but it is guided by the same natural evolutionary forces that have guided our own moral development. For example, Mark Bekoff from the University of Colorado has done a lot of work showing how various social animals use play as a means for establishing and maintaining acceptable behaviors. His work with wolves has demonstrated that conduct conducive to group survival, such as respect, teamwork, and trust, are developed and reinforced through play, and in much the same way as it works in humans. The second source of morality is culture, or more accurately, a transmitter of morality is culture. Culture is a means of codifying established norms and passing them from one generation to the next. While it is not in itself a source of morality, it does play a major role in our understanding of morality, and especially in providing our society the means to navigate complex social interactions. And finally, reason. Reason allows us to defy our cultural conventions and assess the consequences of our actions